The sun hung directly overhead when the sky began to bleed. An acrid, metallic scent filled the air, sharp as rusted iron, as the crimson tear widened. From those fractures came a sound, a low, resonant hum that vibrated in the teeth and made the very pavement feel sticky with unnatural heat. Then, a single, wet droplet struck the observer's cheek. Not water, but something warm and viscous. The hum coalesced into a whisper, not from one source, but from everywhere at once, threading through the wind. It wasn't a language, but an understanding, a command etched directly into the mind. Do not see. Every instinct screamed to look away, but the sky held them, a dreadful fascination rooting them to the spot as the silhouettes began to descend. This is the moment their world ended. Not with a bang, but with a silent, bleeding sky and the things that fell when we were told not to look. But on July 17th, 1923, we didn't have a choice. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and old paper. A low, electrical hum began to vibrate through the floorboards. It was the only sound in that perfect, sun-drenched silence. For exactly 6 minutes and 13 seconds, in the small town of Millhaven, Ohio, the sun stopped making shadows. A crowd of people in 1920s dress stood frozen, every face locked in a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. The air grew heavy with a sharp metallic tang, like the smell of lightning that never strikes. In that impossible, silent glare, a primal dread took hold, paralyzing the town in a moment of pure, cosmic wrongness. Millhaven was a postcard-perfect farming community nestled in a valley so serene, locals claimed the surrounding hills cradled you to sleep each night. Here we find the Millers. John, a war veteran whose steady hands now work the land, though his mind remains perpetually vigilant. The evening air carried the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke as the first stars pierced the violet sky. Sarah's laughter once rang clearer than the church bell itself, and young Mikey knew every secret trail through the ancient woods. Life there was simple, predictable, a rhythm as steady as the seasons. But beneath that familiar surface, the air sometimes carried the faint, metallic scent of ozone after a storm, and the woods held whispers older than the town. It was a peace that felt fragile, like glass waiting for the first crack. The sun rose, casting your shadow long in the morning, short at noon, long again at dusk, a truth as fundamental as gravity. Until the summer of 23. It started with the animals. Old Man Henderson's prized hounds cowered in their kennels at noon, whimpering at the earth. The afternoon heat grew oppressive, smothering the birdsong into an unnatural quiet. Then came the first account. Radio voice. Doc says it's sunstroke, plain and simple. They dismissed it as a trick of the light and an overworked mind. That's what they told Elsie Perkins when she ran into the street screaming that her shadow had hesitated. It had lagged a full second behind her, a sticky, cold dread clinging to the air. The town doctor blamed the heat, while the pastor whispered of modern anxieties. But a secret dread began to take root. Something was profoundly wrong with the light itself. John Miller noticed it next. The air in the hallway grew thick and cold, carrying a faint, metallic scent. His breath hitched as a low, persistent drone seeped into the silence, not from the world outside, but from the walls themselves. It was a sound that spoke not to the ear, but to something deeper and more primal within him. As he drove a fence post into the earth, the shadow of his hammer stretched across the soil, then momentarily blurred, as if uncertain where to fall. A cold, sickening pressure bloomed behind his eyes, sharp and unnatural. The cicadas. Drone warped around him, slowing and distorting like a broken record. Later, Sarah would say, the silence was the worst part. The oppressive noon heat, usually buzzing with life, felt dead, hollow, like the world was holding its breath. And Mikey started drawing pictures, not of trees or houses, but of the voids beneath them. Where does the dark go when the light pushes it? Quote, the boy asked his father. John's breath caught, the air suddenly thick with a metallic tang. He had no answer, only a cold, creeping dread that settled in the silence. Then, a second drawing emerged, this time without the shadow, the figure now suspended weightlessly on the page. The town council called an emergency meeting, their voices a low murmur in the lamplit chamber. They settled on a rational explanation, a rare atmospheric lensing effect, a desert mirage misplaced in their damp valley. Talk of shadow sickness was strictly forbidden, labeled dangerous superstition. But the whispers persisted, slithering through Millhaven streets like a cold, damp draft that seeped under doors. The Shawnee spoke of this valley as the land the sun forgot, where shadowless things moved in plain sight. Then, on July 16th, the temperature refused to climb. At high noon, the light was blinding but carried no warmth, like staring into a frozen star. The wind through the grass sounded less like air and more like whispering voices. People stood frozen in their yards, clutching their arms, watching their own shadows. The shapes were faint, washed out, like watercolor blots on concrete. A metallic scent, like ozone after lightning, hung in the motionless air, as if the sun itself had become a spectator, no longer the source. July 17, 1923. The sky was an unblemished, pitiless blue. At precisely 11:58 a.m., The heavy bronze bell began its toll. The air grew thick and still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. A metallic scent, like ozone and old iron, crept on the breeze. Every soul in the village felt a deep, wordless dread take root. As the final note dissolved into nothingness, a tangible quiet descended, thick and suffocating. The air grew heavy, tasting of damp earth and cold metal. John's fingers tightened around Sarah's, a silent anchor in the sudden void. Little Mikey clung to his father's leg, his small frame trembling with a fear he could not name. The sun hung directly overhead, a perfect silver coin. John looked down at his feet. His shadow, which should have been a small pool at his boots, was gone, not shortened, gone. He scanned the desolate streets of Millhaven, where the searing light revealed a world stripped of shadows. Not a fence post, not a forgotten hat, not even a child playing in the dust cast a single dark line upon the ground. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and dry earth, as if reality itself had been scorched clean. In a hushed, disbelieving whisper, the thought formed. The world had become a flat, silent photograph. The air thickened, swallowing sound and light until only muffled echoes remained. Sarah's voice was a threadbare whisper as she confessed, "John, I feel invisible." Then Mikey gestured toward the town well, his small hand trembling. "The dark's still in there," he said, his words laced with a child's terrible certainty. The crowd's gaze shifted, and there it stood, in that shadowless midday glare. The well's opening was an abyss of absolute, impossible black, a darkness that defied all reason. The air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth and something metallic. A low, resonant hum seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet. No one moved, no one breathed. That perfect void seemed to pull at them, not with gravity, but with a quiet, insistent dread. It was a blackness that shouldn't exist, a tear in the fabric of the day itself. From the abyss below, something shifted. A low, grinding screech, rusty metal under immense pressure, echoed from the depths. It wasn't a form, but a stain on reality itself, a wavering smear in the air like heat haze over old, warped glass. It poured upwards and solidified in the square, a man-shaped void where light simply ceased to exist, and the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and cold iron. The entity was featureless, yet every soul present felt its perception. A scrutiny deeper than sunlight could ever penetrate. A metallic scent, like ozone and rust, thickened the air as the thing shifted. It didn't walk. It simply moved, flowing across the ground like oil over water. A sticky, damp coldness seeped into the space, and a low, whispering hum vibrated through the floorboards. The void manifested beside old Man Henderson, a sudden absence where reality should have been. Where it touched him, his form flattened, losing all depth as if pressed between glass. A dry, rasping gasp tore from his throat, a sound of pure, airless shock. Then, without another sound, his paper-thin body crumpled to the earth. His skin was frigid to the touch, unnaturally cold under the direct sun. A silent, choking panic seized me. The air grew thick, smelling faintly of ozone and something metallic. Every instinct screamed to pull away, but a primal dread held me frozen. People fled, but with no shadows anchoring them, their movements seemed weightless and detached. Like marionettes on a sun-drenched stage, the Shadow Eater drifted through the throng, and wherever it lingered, vitality drained away, replaced by a bone-deep chill. The deep, resonant bong of the church clock cut through the chaos, marking 12:04 p.m. In that moment, John knew there was only one course of action left. He didn't flee from the darkness. He raced toward the last pocket of it remaining. Sprinting to the stone edge, he hurled himself over and plunged into that absolute, swallowing black. Silence followed his descent. Then, the distinct, echoing plink of water dripping in the deep. John landed in shallow, icy water, the shock of cold, a brutal greeting in the pitch. In the natural dark below, his own shadow flickered back to life, cast by the tiny circle of sky above. He looked up, drawn by some primal instinct, and he saw it. The thing above wasn't in the square anymore. Coiled around the well's lip was that same terrifying smear, peering down at him. At his shadow, a metallic scent, like ozone and